let's talk about the necessary components for a human being to feel sadness. In order to discuss that, we're going to pull together the biological, cognitive, and environmental pieces that make emotion possible. Sadness isn't just something that happens to us. It's constructed by the body and the brain and context working together. There is a structured way to describe core components that allow a human being to feel sadness. The first thing is cognitive appraisal. Generally, this is the perception of loss or the perception of misalignment. At the heart of sadness is a recognition that something is missing, lost, or unfulfilled. Often a perceived discrepancy between reality and desire. So there'll be a cognitive trigger, an event or a thought that signals loss, failure, loneliness, or disconnection. For example, losing a relationship, being rejected, not living in alignment with one's identity. So another cognitive appraisal factor is the way we interpret things. Interpretation is when the brain evaluates the event and determines if it's meaningful enough to generate an emotional response. So we've reached the point where an event has activated memories, conscious or subconscious, and we have decided cognitively whether or not our body should respond. This is often done so quickly, it's not in your conscious behavior. Once that sadness cognitive loop is generated, certain brain chemicals must be functioning properly for sadness to be felt. So we start with a cognitive component, which generates neurochemical support. Neurochemical support looks like the basics. I'm sure these will ring a bell. Serotonin. Serotonin is involved in mood regulation, and low levels of serotonin are linked to sadness. Dopamine. Dopamine helps process reward and motivation. Lack of a reward can evoke sadness. Cortisol. Cortisol increases during emotional stress. It's meant to be helpful to mobilize into action. Oxytocin. Oxytocin is a wonderful neurochemical. Oxytocin is released when we feel safe and connected. But oxytocin in its absence, especially in an attachment context, may enhance sadness related to social rejection or loss. I would give the example of puppy love, first boyfriend breaking up, flooded with oxytocin during the stages of the relationship. and the heartbreak that follows when that oxytocin is gone from the body with the loss of the relationship. Broken hearts. The loss of oxytocin causes intense sadness. That's why we have so many love songs about broken hearts. The next phase in a human being experiencing sadness involves the limbic system being activated. The limbic system, especially the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex, must be responsive. This means your brain needs to be online. If there's some type of suppression of brain activity, it can be impossible to feel sadness. So the limbic system, in terms of sadness, there's the amygdala, and it detects emotional salience. It'll help you assess whether a stimulus is threatening or painful. The prefrontal cortex will regulate the emotional response, and it'll allow for reflection or rumination. And the hippocampus will link emotion with memory, which adds a personal weight to the events that are making you sad. The next component of feeling sadness is emotional awareness. So this is where it becomes a little more scientific, the language. So bear with me. To feel sadness, a person must be able to sense and interpret internal emotional cues. Interoception, I'm going to repeat that word. Interoception is the ability to perceive internal bodily sensations. So when sadness hits and your chest feels tight or you get a lump in your throat and you're able to identify that, you are using interoception to identify what's going on in your body. The next factor is labeling. We need to be able to label our emotions. The capacity to recognize and name the feeling as sadness rather than discomfort is part of the process. We often only have a few words to express our emotions. Research has shown the general population has three: happy, sad, and pissed off. If you only have language for three emotions, your experience will be constricted. So developing different language and maybe pulling out a thesaurus and learning all the different words that can be used to express sadness can help develop an emotional awareness and a connection to the feeling of sadness. Language is very important, how we label things. And then there's a third category here. Some individuals, some people with autism spectrum disorder, or a condition known as alexithymia, may feel the physiological part, but not cognitively label it as sadness. And there is a physiological embodiment that has to happen. Sadness often has physical markers which anchor it in the body. facial expression with sadness. It's a universal expression. It's frowning and a lowered gaze. And it's one of the ways we're able to identify by looking at someone that they're feeling sad. A tear response is a physiological embodiment of the parasympathetic nervous system. And if you know me, you may have heard the word vagus nerve. So that's your vagus nerve at work. You might get muscle heaviness or fatigue. Sadness can depress the nervous system, slowing movement or speech. It can cause a constriction in the throat, chest, or gut. There's an environmental and social context. So bear with me. This is the last aspect that I'm going to cover, but it's an important one. We learn when and how to feel sadness by interacting with our environment. Attachment and social modeling play a large role. Consider that early caregivers taught you what sadness looks like and feels like, or they may have modeled suppressing sadness. There are cultural norms. Some cultures encourage emotional expression and others suppress it. And that will impact your internal access to identify and feel sadness. And lastly, there needs to be a safe space for that level of vulnerability. Feeling sadness often requires psychological safety. And a lack of psychological safety will shut the emotion down. So, in summary, for sadness to be felt, a person typically needs a perceived loss or emotional discrepancy, a brain and body capable of emotional signaling, and there are some medical conditions that cause a disruption in that communication. People can't feel feelings sometimes. Thirdly, a neurochemical tool that modulates your mood. And then the cognitive capacity to identify, that's labeling, and interpret, make sense of the emotion. A physiological response that aligns with sadness is required. This is a mind-body connection experience. And lastly, environment or history that has allowed emotional openness. So I hope this little lecture on how sadness is cognitively created and emotionally experienced in the body physiologically. Thank you for sticking with me. That was a long one.